Welcome back, my lords and ladies, to the Cast Beyond the Wall. We are your guide to all things Westerosi, and we're here to bring you a review, an analysis, and a fan v fan debate on each episode of Game of Thrones' successor series, House of the Dragon. We made it to the end of another season. It was a short one, 8 episodes instead of 10. And farewell, friends, for another couple of years. But before we say farewell, we did want to give one last handshake, one last high five in a Season 2 review. And so in today's discussion, we're going to provide our review and wrap-up discussion covering House of the Dragon Season 2. We're going to start by talking about how well the season fits together as a whole before highlighting what worked best and maybe what worked worst or didn't work at all. We're going to close out the show by naming our Season 2 winners, losers, and wildcard players. And then we'll speculate maybe a little bit about what we expect to see in Season 3. I'm your host, Caleb Masters, and as always, a Baelish always looms in the shadows, ready to drop a podcast in the RSS feed at the most surprising moment. Daniel Stull, my co-host, Kristen Cole, #1 fan. Sir, introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Daniel Stull, and I was thinking about this season, Caleb, as we were reflecting on the whole season whole, and we've mentioned this several times, but this was really a season for the small folk, and that was really cool. I really enjoyed that, and it got me thinking, like, in terms of like our podcast, like I would be the small folk in this dynamic, and so where's my dragon, Caleb? Like, it's time for me. You put me on the dragon. Let me have. Let me be a dragon rider. It's my time to rise up.
I mean, if you want to go wait in line for the dragons and hope that you don't get cannibalized by or lit on fire by the dragons, I say, yeah. I mean, there's a long line. There's a long line of people out there who want the dragon, Daniel. So, I mean, if you want to take that risks, of course, I will support that. But I can in no way ensure your survival to the end of this podcast. So, do you really want to risk that? As a friend, I'm saying, don't do it. Don't do it.
I mean, I think I've got the blood. I think I've got what it takes. So I guess we'll just have to find out.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's been nice knowing you. Daniel Stull will not be rejoining us next season because tragically he got eaten and devoured by a dragon at his own behest. I tried to warn him.
We'll see.
And if you want to see Daniel Stull getting munched on dragons in between our seasons, you can always keep up with every update on the Cast Beyond the Wall on our social media channels, including Twitter at cast_beyond_GOT and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cast Beyond the Wall. So as I said, we're going to be taking a long hiatus after this episode, and we will have updates for more programming that will be dropped in that RSS feed or via our social media posts in the future. Some people have said, hey, are you going to do a Night in the Seven Kingdoms? And I was like, we'll wait and see. You must subscribe to the podcast and follow us to find out if we cover that. I suspect it's going to be at least 2 years before we have the next season of House of the Dragon. So the best way to stay informed about all of our Westerosi discussions here on the Cast Beyond the Wall is by subscribing. And one last favor. You can toss a coin to your friends here at the Cast Beyond the Wall. Let us know how we did this season. Leave us a rating and review on your preferred podcast app, most specifically Apple Podcasts. We really need more reviews to be discovered by the small folk like Daniel Stull. And I should note, once again, that if you're tuning in for the first time, we are not going to be spoiling any future events of House of the Dragon. So neither of us have read Fire and Blood, so everything we're talking about is specific to Season 2. Daniel, we got a little bit of listener feedback I wanted to share with the listeners as to close us out. Our friend Tracy Darnell, who had sent an email earlier this season, sent another one, and it was commenting on our Otto Hightower question mark. Now, I stand by the critique we had, which is that was the most bizarre scene to insert into the episode, like just lacking all sorts of context. But say it wasn't. Here is what Darnell's theory was about what's going on. He says, doesn't the Beesberries make sense? They purposely mention the Beesberries several times, stating that they are taking revenge for what happened to Lord Beesbury. So Lord Beesbury, I think it was last season, was the guy who had his eye smashed on the little ball thing at the end of season 1 of House of the Dragon. So that's Lord Beesbury. Yes. Cole, so Kristen Cole, Daniel's biggest crush, smashed his head into the council ball thing. I guess that's a technical term for it, the council ball thing. So since we know their armies are on the move, marching against the high towers, wouldn't it make sense that they take Otto hostage? I'm feeling super confident in this theory. Keep up the great work. Love each of you fellas. Well, Tracy, thanks again for the kind words. I've also heard this theory online. And as a guy who hasn't read Fire and Blood, I just have to say that's about the most informed theory I could hear of. There's not really been a lot of breadcrumbs laid for Otto being kidnapped, in my opinion. So, I say, great job. Bring him back the Westerosi conspiracy theories. Daniel Stull, what do you think of this idea?
Yeah, I kind of am in the same spot as you. There wasn't a lot of information really given or hinting at that sort of thing. But if I were to think back and think about who might want to kidnap Otto, if it wasn't like Rhaenyra or someone in Team Black, this could be a reasonable theory. So I mean, obviously we're going to have to wait and see if that pans out, because I don't think the show itself is giving us any sort of information to hint that might be the case. But maybe they're going to start laying some of that at the beginning of season 3. But I could see this being who has kidnapped Otto. Yeah.
I mean, they have had a couple of references to the Beesburies. It's just very in passing. So maybe it's one of those when we watch it later, we'll be like, oh, they totally laid the track and we just didn't see it, which is possible. That's always a good twist, I would argue. Well, listeners, if you have more Westerosi theories, of course, or if you just want to give us any of your feedback in between seasons of the Cast Beyond the Wall, you can let us know by sending us an email at castbeyondthewall@live.com. All right, Daniel. So I thought, since we spent a lot of time last week talking about how disappointed we were in the season 2 finale cliffhanger, I thought maybe it would be a good time to talk about our favorite cliffhangers, whether it be in film, television, or video games. So I'm going to ask you the question, what is your favorite cliffhanger? And maybe elaborate on what makes a good cliffhanger so compelling.
Yeah, as I was thinking about this, I don't even know. I could even see some people debating on whether or not the thing I'm about to mention is a cliffhanger, but I would very much say that it is. And I'm going to say Inception is the movie that came to my mind as one of the best cliffhangers. Now, I know what some people are already going to say is that's not a cliffhanger. You have all the information, but the way that it sort of ends, it doesn't give us the answer of what is actually happening. So, and that's sort of left to the audience. And I think for me, that makes a really good cliffhanger, because we do get some resolution for on an emotional beat for the character, but then the story isn't exactly told in a way where we know definitively what happened, and that's sort of left open-ended. So again, I could see the debate on whether or not that would be a cliffhanger, but as I was thinking about this, I felt like for me, I would call that one of the best cliffhangers ever, because I'm left not fully getting answered from within the context of the film of how the story actually ended.
So I'm going to say right now, I don't think that's a cliffhanger. But I respect the argument. It does have an open-ended question, which is kind of part of a cliffhanger. The official definition of cliffhanger, there's 2 different ones here. I'll read. I think both of them apply here. Number 1 is an ending to an episode of a serial drama that leaves the audience in suspense. Or to broaden the definition a little bit, it's a story or event with a strong element of suspense. I guess if you really twisted my arm, you could say Inception fits into the latter. I don't know, though. I feel like that's more like an open-ended question rather than because cliffhanger implies, I feel like a cliffhanger is we're hanging you off a cliff. You have to tune in next time to find out whether or not we pull you up, that sort of thing. But
yeah, I definitely agree with that. For me, I did sort of twist it a little bit in my head to say that we are left to speculate on what exactly, spoilers for Inception that came out a long time ago, but what exactly, was this actually a dream or was this actually reality? The story doesn't tell us that, and so the audience is left with that suspense of not exactly knowing, and it is more of an ambiguous sort of ending, allowing the audience to sort of have the space to speculate on that. But I can see your point too, where 100% it's debatable on whether or not that's actually a cliffhanger or not.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like it's a little squishy. I would argue that there needs to be some sort of follow-up, or at least the intention for follow-up for it to be counted as a cliffhanger.
Sure.
Christopher Nolan had no intention of making an Inception 2 or
Absolutely.
revealing the answer to that. So I'm going to go with, for example, I'm going to go with, in a movie, I'm going to say Before Sunset. That's part of the second entry in Richard Linklater's Before trilogy starring Ethan Hawke and Julia Delpy. So spoilers for this movie that's like 20 years old almost. But the second movie takes place when the couple reunite in Paris 9 years after having an emotional encounter in the first film. And at the end of the movie, it's left ambiguous about whether or not they're going to stay on whether or not they're going to stay together. So they have this whimsical moment. They adventure 9 years previous. They get back together. They have they rekindle the magic. And at the end, it's left open, a little open-ended about, is he going to stay with her? Is she going to stay with him? Is it going to work out? It's sort of implied they're probably going to stay together, but you don't really know until we get Before Midnight, the third movie in the trilogy, 9 years after that. So, I mean, I love it because it's emotional stakes, right? You're really invested in these characters. You're wondering, it's a romantic story. Like, are they going to stay together or not? The intention is to pay it off with the third movie, which they do. And also, like, from a story perspective, if you look at the three movies, it's sort of the end of Act 2. The first movie, you watch it, the assumption is, until you find out there's a sequel that comes out 9 years later, it's a one and done. And then you get the second one, which is like, they're reunited. Now we're telling an ongoing story. How's it going to play out in the third one? So I really like that option for a film. Of course, you could also say an age-old one would be The Empire Strikes Back, for example, is a huge cliffhanger in the Star Wars saga. And the other thing I'd say that maybe makes it a good cliffhanger too, at least in my opinion, is the cliffhanger is not a way, you don't stop in the middle of something. It's whenever you're sort of using a cliffhanger to bookend the end of one thing in the beginning and tease the next thing. So Empire Strikes Back, I think, does that really effectively, where we have this massive reveal. Darth Vader is Luke's father. We don't know, and Han Solo has been kidnapped. We don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but we know in the next movie that Luke will have to reconfront Darth Vader, and they will at least attempt to save Han Solo. Again, Empire Strikes Back stands on its own as a movie, with the ending setting up what the next adventure is going to be. But it still feels complete. Unlike, I would argue, House of the Dragon Season 2, where I just feel like we just stopped right in the middle of the story. I would also say, if I'm going to look at television, a couple that I really like are Breaking Bad, Gliding Over All. That's the Season 5A finale. So they broke the last season of that show into two parts. And spoilers for Breaking Bad, which is also concluded about 10 years ago now. The episode Gliding Over All ends with Hank, Walt's brother-in-law, coming to the realization that Walt was the guy he was chasing the whole time, based on a Leaves of Grass, a book sitting on the toilet. It was incredible. It was incredible because it is the end of sort of the first half of the story, which is Walt's rise to becoming like a true like crime lord sort of story. But it sets up the final stretch, which is going to be Hank finally confronting Walt. Lastly, I would say Arcane Season 1. We haven't seen Season 2 yet, so we'll see how it goes. But I'm optimistic that had it seems as if right now, just watching Season 1, it sets up beautifully for a sequel season, but also definitively ends Season 1 with a bang. So just a few examples of cliffhangers that I like.
It's interesting you said Breaking Bad, because when I was thinking of this, I did actually think of Better Call Saul, actually, which they did a similar thing to kind of what you're talking about with the later season of Better Call Saul, which is a more recent show, so I don't want to get too much into the spoilers of that. But there's a scene in the final season where they do like a mid-season sort of finale, and I think if you remember what I'm talking about, because I believe you've seen it, where there's a character that surprisingly gets killed, very surprisingly in the middle of the scene. You thought that maybe the the consequences of some choices that some characters were making were going to be the death of someone else, but then it ends up being this other character, and then we just stop and we have to wait several weeks before we get the second half of that story. So that it's interesting that you call it Breaking Bad, because I also thought about Better Call Saul. So obviously a connected storyteller there, and Vince Gilligan in the way that they, just he decides to tell his stories and things like that. So
I'd also give a shout out to Lost, which listeners on this feed know we're both fans of, but they did a really good job. I mean, I would say the season 1 finale where they finally get the hatch open. You don't find out what's in the hatch, but like the journey, the whole season, like essentially the second half of that season is the journey to them figuring out how to work together to open the hatch. And then again, cliffhanger. We still don't know what's inside, but we know when we pick up next season, we know that is going to be business item number 1 for the story. And it is, and it pays off. You could also look at the season 3 finale, Through the Looking Glass, where you discover that some of what you thought were flashbacks you were watching were actually flash forwards, which kind of foreshadow where the characters are going to go next once they get off the island. So, a lot of great cliffhangers out there. What are some of your favorite cliffhangers, listeners? Let us know by hitting us up on social media or at castbeyondthewall@live.com. Daniel, let's dive into our final review of season 2 of House of the Dragon. So how well do you think season 2 paid off on the promise of the first season? And I'm asking this question because, at the first season, we said this is all going to be table setting. We had the big time leap thing, which we were pretty critical of at the time, but we were like, well, it's going to pay off because we've got to get invested in these stories and understand the character dynamics for the big war that's coming in season 2. How well do you think season 2 delivered on that promise?
Yeah, this was actually kind of tough for me to answer when I was thinking about this question. I think where I'm kind of landing is it does give us like a small taste of some of that, where we do get to see sort of one major dragon battle interaction, but it did feel still like we were doing a lot as I'm reflecting back on the entire season, it does still feel like we're doing a lot of setup, and now it feels like, well, now season 3 has to be the big sort of like war dragon dance, Dance of Dragons sequences that we've been sort of promised. Like if season 1 ended with that moment where Rhaenyra turns and faces the camera, and like it's like, okay, the war is on now, is what at least it felt like in the moment. And we didn't see a lot of war. I felt like, yes, there was a little bit of like maybe behind the scene, like sort of subtle warfare going on, but no like big war sequences that we really got. So I think it felt like coming into the season we were going to get a lot of that, and I don't really think we did. So I think when we're talking about payoff of season 1, we haven't gotten to it yet, which I'm surprised by. I thought we'd get to it a lot more of it this season.
Yeah, I still think season 2 feels a little bit like a tease. Now, we did get the battle at Rook's Rest, so I don't want to sell that short. It was a pretty incredible sequence right there in the middle of the season, but I guess it's not even just about the spectacle. It's about like the plot momentum. It's about where the pacing. It's about where we are in the story, that sort of thing. And I think there are certain things that pay off or are rewarded or further developed upon that I'm really intrigued by. But I think in general, the end of season 1 is like, oh man, gloves are off. Now it's war. We really didn't quite get there. I don't think. And we barely got, I think we just got more of a tease of it. So mostly I think that the plotting of this season feels very drawn out. Now I'm not going to be too cynical about this until the whole show is done. Season 4 is going to be the end, but it does feel to me like in the moment, it feels like we're really stretching the story out more than it needs to be, but it's too soon for me to say. I haven't read the book Fire and Blood, and I don't know exactly where it's going. But you would think there would have been more, whether it's like small skirmishes and other parts of the realm, or just, I don't know, like something to send us, like a send-off episode, whether it be a big battle or just like, again, like we talked about last week, just something that's going to pay off on the promise of season 1. Whereas I felt like we just got a little more of a teaser. And those 2 episodes that we're missing felt pretty crucial in my mind in terms of like delivering on the goods. But, that's not to say that it was a bad season, just that the payoffs are still coming. It's like classic George R. R. Martin. Winds of Winter's coming. It's going to be huge. You won't believe it. It'll be here eventually. Still waiting. Daniel, what would you say were the main strengths of this season?
I think we got a lot more time with the characters, and that could be just a little bit of thinking back on season 1, where we talked a lot about the time jumps and things felt like really fast paced, like we were flying through time. This season felt really slow, and in some ways, I think that was maybe there was some negatives that came along with that, but also I think there were some positives. Like we got a lot of time, quiet moments with characters, really getting to see them reflect and sit with kind of the things that were going on. And I really enjoyed a lot of those moments. I think that, there are a couple of characters who I didn't feel super connected to coming into season 2 that I feel a lot stronger connection to, like Otto and actually Rhaenyra. I think, as I'm reflecting, are two characters that I feel more connected to, or I understand a lot better maybe than I did at the beginning of the season. So I think that is probably one of the greatest strengths that came to mind right away, was just some of the getting to fully give space to characters and their experiences and really understand where they're at. I think was a great strength of this season for me.
Yeah, I think the characters was definitely a step up in general. It was funny. I also agree that Otto was not in the season very much, but I think they did a great job contrasting his approach to the politicking to the next generation of high towers, or I guess Targaryen high towers, who were going to run things and how recklessly they'd run it. So I would say I sympathize with him, but I really liked the dynamic he brought to the chaos, the order or attempted order that we kind of lost that in the second half of the season. I also, it's funny you mentioned Rhaenyra. I still feel like I'm having the hardest time connecting with this character. I really liked her when she was played by Millie Alcock in season 1, and ever since the shift. And I don't think it's the actress's fault. I just think it's the way the character's been written. I always feel at arm's length, and now I feel like she's kind of desperate. She spent most of the season being pretty desperate, which I had a hard time also fully appreciating. So I don't know. I hope I come around to her. I'm definitely rooting for her still. I think I just still think she's positioned as sort of like the closest thing we have to a primary protag in this show. I did think that the politicking was up a game. I loved all the small council scenes. We got more of those this season. And honestly, if I have one takeaway, it's that I loved watching the high towers way more this season than I did last season. Last season, I just was like, I hate these guys. They're just terrible. This season, I still hate them, but it's like watching Succession. I loved seeing how their petty arguments and differences of opinion really get in the way of making progress. So all that I thought was a lot more fun. I, again, can't say the same thing about House Black. I didn't think the stuff with Rhaenyra, like all of the politicking over there, really got interesting until like the 6th episode, which is not great. So, but politicking in general, I think, especially in King's Landing, was a high note for me.
Yeah, bouncing off that a little bit too. I think I was thinking about the Greens in general. I think like Aegon and Aemond are a lot, we get a lot more time with them this season than we did last season. So especially Aegon, I think is way, I would think he maybe been a little bit of one-dimensional character in season 1, but like in this season, he really gets to flourish. They really humanize him, and we get a lot stronger understanding of Aegon and Aemond to a little bit of a lesser degree. But yeah, as you were talking about the Greens and some of the politicking and the small councils, I think those our characters are a lot more fleshed out this season.
That includes Kristen Cole, right, Daniel?
Absolutely not.
You love the time
we don't
spend with him.
The less we talk about him, the better. I think.
Well, good news for you. They basically cut him out of the last 2 episodes. So
I was very happy about that.
I know you were disappointed. What would you say are perhaps maybe the biggest weaknesses of season 2?
I mean, we've kind of already touched on it, but I think it just feels incomplete. And so it feels a little bit difficult to fully critique it, but it feels like you said earlier, we ended in the middle of it, is how it feels. And so I think that's its weakness, is that we haven't gotten to see yes, there's 4 seasons going to happen, and that's going to be one overarching story, but each season should feel like a complete piece of or like a chapter or or something like that. And it just doesn't feel like we've finished this chapter yet. And so I think that's its biggest weakness. And it also makes it kind of hard. It makes me resistant to wanting to like fully critique it, because I feel like, well, I don't have the full picture yet. So I can't actually say what I think or feel about it just yet. But yeah, I think that is like for sure the biggest problem.
I think you can critique for something for feeling incomplete. And I know, like, in the long run, maybe we can say as a series, it benefited the series. But, like, I'm just thinking back about Game of Thrones. I mean, even those last 2 seasons that weren't great, like, they had a clear beginning, middle, and end. They picked up. They felt like their own book. I mean, that was how Martin had it. You know, they adapted the previous seasons, Game of Thrones, Clash of Kings, Storm of Swords. Storm of Swords, they broke that into 2 seasons and made it work as well, making it feel very complete. So it feels like hodgepodge. It feels like there wasn't a lot of thought into like how they broke the season down. It's a disappointment, frankly. I would say that plot momentum is my biggest one. I've already talked about that a lot, but like, I mean, we spend 3 episodes spinning our wheels before there's like a battle sequence. And then we spend the next 4 episodes. Again, I don't want to say nothing happens in these episodes, but like at the end of the day, Daemon spends the entire season just hanging out. Just hanging out. Like he doesn't actually do anything of significance this season. Harrenhal stuff was cool. I loved it. They did a great job adapting what I imagine was some pretty flat material or non-material for him. But I just, nothing happened there. Like with Rhaenyra, okay. Rhaenyra starts the season down for the count, and we do see how she rallies and gets dragons. Okay, that's pretty cool. But we could have done that in like 3 episodes. That's like that feels like a mini arc in a season, not a whole season arc, right? And then also, as much as I love what they did with the King's Landing stuff, it's another scenario where I'm like, I mean, again, all these battles we could have gotten to a lot faster. I don't know. I'm all about plots taking their time, and maybe if, again, to your point, maybe if it felt like more of a complete picture by the end, I'd be less critical of it. But as it stands, I'm like, well, it didn't really end up getting anywhere, and I felt like we spent most of the time not getting anywhere. So it's hard for me to say for sure, whether or not the season was successful on telling the story. I do think it did a great job developing the characters, though. And I will say, I had a couple of characters I enjoyed last season, season 1. Season 2, though, I'm a lot more bought in on these stories, personally. Well, Daniel, on my other podcast, the Cinematic Schematic, we give out letter grades for movies we review. So I thought, hey, let's give out a letter grade for House of the Dragon Season 2. You've done substitute teaching before. You know what it's like to school the kids, the youngs. What letter grade would you give House of the Dragon Season 2?
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to come in high or not, but I think, as I said, it's incomplete. And I think that's like the biggest. Each episode in and of itself as an episode, I don't think any of them are outright bad at all. I think a lot of them are actually really good. But in the full context of the season, I think that it does feel like it comes up short. So it feels weird to say things were bad, because I don't think the individual moments, I was loving the moments of it. But then when I look back, just the whole story doesn't fully land. So I went with a B. That no minus, no plus, just a straight B. Like, I think there's a lot of really good things that are happening. There's a lot of super interesting things that are happening. The performances, there are a lot of great performances. There's a lot of connections I have with characters, but I don't get a lot of the completion of the story. And so for that, like, this could have been, an A or even higher, depending on how much that payoff. But since we haven't got that, I have to knock it down to a B.
Yeah, there are A episodes, like A letter grade episodes in this season for sure. Mm-hmm. I mean, especially like episode 4 is a highlight. But I mean, I even think like episode 7 was really strong. Like, so there are top tier episodes in this season, but as a whole, you could almost joke and give it the I for incomplete, but I think that's a little harsh. I also came down with the B for the same reasons that you said. I feel like this was good TV, not great TV. I don't feel like we're not in Game of Thrones fervor right now. And, here's the thing about Game of Thrones that people forget. Like, it took time for it to build up the momentum to get to the big climactic season 3 and 4. payoffs, and then they kind of had to start over again with season 5 in terms of the plot momentum. But this show it just doesn't have that energy quite. So and that's Game of Thrones is an A plus when it's firing on all cylinders. This is just a B. It's pretty good. It's better than most things on TV. Not the best. I can name a few shows that I like better, but for what it's doing, I think it's mostly successful, even if it would benefit from, having 2 more episodes. All right, Daniel. So now that we've told the people what we think of this season, I thought maybe we could go through some highlights in terms of like things we really liked, and maybe or characters or moments that we want to call out. So Daniel, which characters were you most invested in this year?
Well, I think I was definitely invested in Alicent pretty much the whole time, and that's probably going to be the character that I was most invested in. I was surprised when I was thinking back, like I said earlier, that I actually found looking back like some of my top moments that I felt like the most investment in it was actually Rhaenyra, which I was surprised by because in the moment I don't know if I would have said that, but looking back, I think maybe that's sort of retroactively a little bit true. So those two stand out, and I will say Daemon. I will get to whether or not like that investment felt worth it at the end, but I was really invested in his story. I thought what they were doing at Harrenhal and like kind of amping up the supernatural stuff was super interesting. I was really excited to see like what they were doing with that. So I was invested in that storyline a lot throughout the season. So I think those 3 characters really stood out to me as some of the ones that I was most intrigued on what we were doing and where we were going.
So it's Alicent, Rhaenyra, and Daemon, the main 3.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to lean towards Daemon myself. I was really intrigued by what was going on. I love the psychology. I love sort of him coming to terms with the cost of power and him kind of realizing he's not very good at being a king type figure. He's just kind of a bully. He's a soldier. That's what he does. That's who he is. And sort of him having this psychological come-uppance was an interesting journey. I still don't feel like we quite got... we talked about this last week. I don't know that his behaviors... It's yet to be seen how his behaviors have changed because of all this, actually. So I guess that's kind of hard to say. But I was very invested in that storyline, really curious about where it was going to go. And then I did find, I would say, the Aegon, Aemond, Otto dynamic I really liked, even though Otto was only in the first couple of episodes. But those 2 episodes that really set the tone for how these 3 people rule differently. And I think you see, like with Aemon, for example, he respects Otto because he sees the competence, he sees the success, he sees the wisdom, even though they might butt heads sometimes, versus Aegon, who's like, I'm the king, I do what I want, no one tells me what to do. So I loved that tension that you felt amongst like sort of the turnover of power that happened a few times throughout the season. So no, that's not one character in particular, but it was a dynamic. I was always eager to see what they were going to do with it, scene to scene. Again, small council meetings always paid in dividends. I was hoping I'd be a little more invested in Larys Strong, and he has some moments, but at the end of the day, not enough screen time this year, man. Not up to the Varys Littlefinger level. So Daniel, maybe give me a breakdown here. What would you say was the storyline that was both the most compelling to you, and then separately, what was the storyline you were least compelled by this year?
I'll start with the least compelled because I think that was fairly easy for me to pick, and it's gonna be the Corlys storyline, just because you said it even I think last week, like every scene was basically him on a dock talking to someone, and nothing was really moving in any direction. So I think that was pretty uninteresting. So I think that's for me is going to be the least compelling. And it's hard to say because I kind of have to separate some things in my mind. Like I think I was probably the most compelled during the story of Daemon, but I think the ending and the way that like we don't really get to see the resolution, like kind of like deflated my feelings on it a little bit. But I think if you were like asking me in the middle of the season, that's probably what I would have answered. But as I'm looking back, I think I actually was probably most just because Alicent as an interesting character, just as her character is so interesting to me. I loved what they've done with her character. And I know there's some, questions and critiques about the way that her story ends, but just seeing her continuously like start in this really like perhaps one of her most powerful positions at the beginning of the season and slowly get deflated to where she feels like she's completely devoid of power and tries to gain that back at the end. But I think that for me was like as a character storyline is one of the most compelling things for me.
Yeah, I think Corliss retweet, same thing. I don't have much more to say. That's again, it's one of those where I guess if it had paid off by the end of the season, I would have been like, all right, that was why we spent all that time. We saw that happen in Game of Thrones a few times where you're like, why are we? The storyline's not very the House of Black and White, for example, with Arya. A storyline that for most of the season didn't pay off, but then by the end of the season, something would happen where you're like, okay, maybe this wasn't my favorite storyline, but it paid off in a way. There is momentum and advancement here. That storyline went absolutely nowhere. And again, a little bit conspiracy theory, but I'm just like, I can feel the budget cuts. I can feel that Dave Zaslav was making even their biggest show spend less money, cutting the episode order down from 10 to 8. It really hurt. I think a lot of some of those storylines. Another one, was it Lena? There was another, like the hunt for the wild dragon up in the Eyrie was just like another storyline. I was like, what are we doing here? I mean, it doesn't pay off in any meaningful way. So yeah, those would be kind of my low points. I will say, in addition to the Hightower stuff that I've already said that I liked, I will say seeing the small folk storyline pay off by the end was really fulfilling. That was actually probably for me the biggest win of the season, because when they introduced those characters, you're like, well, clearly they want us to care about these people enough, but they kept coming back. And I'm like, okay, where's it going to go? This is really interesting. And I just initially thought, well, this is just sort of like contrast how poorly the Hightowers are doing. I was not in any way expecting it to tie into the A plot. I was thinking it was going to be a B plot or C plot that would have some impact on the larger story, but not that significant. No, this goes right up to A plot. These two of these guys, Hugh is Dragon Rider. It's so I found that to be a very, very fulfilling part of season 2. And that is because of where they ended it. That is one of the storylines that I do feel as if it paid off sufficiently from start to finish.
Yeah, that's a really good call out. I didn't think about that right away, but that was a great compelling storyline all the way through. One of the better storylines of the season for sure.
Yes, now I can't wait until I'm sure one of them dies in whatever the next battle is. I'm confident one of those guys are going to die pretty soon. Well, Daniel, what is the room for improvement award going to? Who would you what is an area that you think that they can improve upon in season 3?
I mean, if the greatest weakness is that it feels incomplete, I think the biggest thing they can do in season 3 is making storylines feel whole and complete and paying off the things that they set up. Because like I'm excited about all the things that they set up, and now I just have to wait another 2 years, maybe 3 years before I get to see that. And that is going to feel probably a little deflating, like that I didn't get, like that I have to just hold that, suspense or excitement for 3 years instead of getting to like see the result of that now. So I think that's like the number one thing that they could do to, like, if we're talking about my later grade, like what could I do to bump it from a B to an A, is like pay off the things that you're setting up. Cause I'm interested and I'm invested in them. I just still, you're just making me wait for them. So I think that would be the number one thing, that would, work for me, as well as like some of those, you mentioned several storylines where we were like, why are we here? Like, what are we doing? So I think maybe some of the, like we talked about this at one episode, like maybe the structuring of the season. Like I think one of the things you said throughout some of our episodes was, where are we at in the season?
Yeah.
And so I think that could be another improvement of like making it clear, like beginning, middle, end. And structuring
it's a pacing issue, right? That's also what it comes down to. So like, for example, if they knew this was going to be an 8-episode season going in, and I think they did, I don't know that for sure, but I think that they knew that, then it needs to be structured like an 8-episode season. This feels like it was structured like a 10-episode season where there were 2 episodes missing. And I don't, there's a lot of shows that have, Lost, for example, the first 3 seasons of that show had like 23, 24 episodes a season. And then later seasons, I think it was like 14 or 15. I mean, it's all like, know how many episodes you have and structure it appropriately. And Lost is probably a bad example because back in that day, they just had to like crank out episodes all the time. Like, but with House of the Dragon, Game of Thrones, with prestige TV, like on HBO, like you have the time, what story beats you need to hit when in the season. And Game of Thrones, again, was really great at this. Like usually there was a big climactic thing or like a high point roughly, either towards the end of the beginning or the middle of the season, and then it would start to ratchet up towards a big climactic thing that would happen in either episode 9 or episode 10, usually episode 9. And then if there was episode 10, usually episode 10 would be kind of dealing with the aftermath of 9 and clearly kind of setting up, all right, here's where we're going next. And yeah, it really feels like that's what they were doing here, a 10 episode season with 8 episodes. So pace it appropriately, I would say. That's my biggest feedback in terms of narrative improvement. Yes, completion, but also it's okay that you had 8 episodes. And if that maybe that means you have to adapt 10 episodes worth of story into 8 episodes, which means some things have to go, if that's what it takes. That's just my one area of improvement is the pacing, I would say. All right, Daniel. Well, let's, start to wrap up by talking about what we expect to see next season. So here's what we know about season 3. Production is not starting until 2025. So it's going to be filming next year, probably for several months, and then it'll go into post-production. I'm thinking like most optimistic is going to be a early like Q1, maybe beginning of Q2 2026. I think is the earliest we get the next season. If I was hedging my bets. We also know now that the series will end at the end of season 4. And Ryan Condal, the showrunner, described season 3 as an air quotes all-out war compared to season 2's medieval warfare. He said that in the making of the season finale. So, Daniel, we've talked about our complaints with the pacing, the incompletion, but we also talked about a lot of things we did like. So, what stories would you like to see them focus on more in season 3?
Well, I think for one, the actual warfare that you're talking about, I think needs to be a focus of a story, which we didn't get a ton of. I would actually like to see more Otto. I think that was like missing a lot this season. So obviously there's this weird kidnapping thing that's going on with him right now that we're not exactly sure where that's going, but I would love to see more Otto. I think, him missing those last like 4 or 5 episodes or whatever it was like, was sad to see him not there. So I would love to see more of that. And I would like to see, more. I mean, we didn't get much of it in season 1, but I would love to see the small folk storyline continue in season 3. I think that was a kind of a nice little surprise for this season and ended up being one of the strongest stories. And I would love to continue to have their stories be told. So I think that would be some of the things that I'm would be wanting and excited about as we move into season 3.
Yeah, I think with season 3, my biggest thing is I also had the small folk down. I think keeping that thread going, and I think they will. I will say the one thing that popped out to me about the season 2 finale was there's even a scene where one of Aemon's like subordinates is like, "Hey, like Rhaenyra sent some food in like via boat," and he's like, "All right, shut down all the docks. Everything's got to be inspected." And he's like, "Well, that's going to slow down our supply of food." And he's like, "Well, we all have to make sacrifices." Totally not even thinking about the fact that the people, like how his decisions are negatively impacting the citizens, which provides Rhaenyra an advantage. Not only is she more likely to win the love and affection, but it's like, yeah, they're treating them so badly, people are defecting to her. So it's an opportunity. So I think keeping that going, I would love to see where that plot goes. And hopefully Rhaenyra can kind of keep playing that favor. I am a little worried now that she's got all these dragons, it might backfire and she loses that love and support very quickly. Alice Rivers, Daemon, Give me some stuff. What's going on with that? Alice Rivers hanging out. A lot of mystery there. And lastly, I would just say, remember the Starks? How they opened the season? And then we never saw them again? I mean, it's funny. I'm not even the Stark lover. I'm not even like the number one Stark fan. That's Daniel Stull. But I'm like, bring in the Starks. Bring in some new blood, new houses, new families. That's another thing that Game of Thrones did really well that I don't know that House of the Dragon's done super well, which is bring in new, fresh characters, new houses to kind of keep things a little more lively. So would love to see that next season. Daniel, I asked you the question at the beginning of the season, Team Black or Team Green? Where do your allegiances lie now?
I think I have to say from a holistic perspective that I'm pretty squarely in Team Black supporter. Now, I've said numerous times, love Alicent, but I guess she did just do this sort of like betrayal of her family, potentially, or she's at least considering it. So we'll see where that goes. But love Alicent, hope that she is okay and fine. But holistically, I think I want to support the Blacks more. I think that they're seeming to try to move in a more like direction that I can get behind versus what the Greens are trying to do.
Yeah, they're more progressive. They care about the people, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at this point, again, I felt like season 1 made it pretty clear. For me, it was pretty clear that you're like, yeah, I mean, you're supposed to like both of them, mostly Alicent and Rhaenyra, but you're definitely rooting for Rhaenyra. This season, I feel like made that explicitly clear because, like, Aemon is a great character, and I love the kind of fear he instills. I love what he brings to the show, but like, I don't think anyone's like, yeah, Aemon, kill them all. I don't think he's clearly supposed to be sort of not, no one's an antagonist per se, but he's definitely supposed to be the one who's not got the people's best interest at heart, right? And so I'm pro with the people. And in this case, that's Rhaenyra. And Alicent's already defected. Or seemingly defected. I guess we'll see how that pays off. But I think Team Black all the way, man. All the way. Keep riding all the way. Even though, I've said too much. All right, Daniel. As we always do, we need to wrap up this season naming our winners, losers, and biggest wild card players before handing out our special awards for season 2. Who do you have down as this season's winner?
Yeah, I think I have to go with Rhaenyra. I think if I'm thinking about where she started the season and where she's ended, she has significantly increased her power and her impact, like to the point where Alicent's actually supposedly defecting. And at the beginning, we had just come off of like the death of her son and how's she going to respond to that? And then there's the whole sort of thing where they, a son for a son episode where they totally fumbled the assassination with Daemon. And so then Daemon leaves. And so she was seemingly in this very rough spot, but now she seems to have really put herself in a great spot with all these dragons. And she's got the small folk on her side and she's helping them out. And she's got all these new dragon riders. So I think that it has to, from where we started at the beginning of the season to where we've ended, I think Rhaenyra has probably progressed and put herself in the most advantageous, moved herself to that side in the most effective way. So I gotta go with Rhaenyra.
I like your answer. I would have put the same thing, but I thought I'd mix it up a little bit. And I'm going to say the real winner this season was the power of friendship, because Rhaenyra and Alicent, friends again? Question mark? Uneasy? I don't know. Maybe friends is a strong way to put it, but they're on the same side at this very specific moment in time. So the power of friendship, they worked it out, kind of. Although there's still the whole thing with Rhaenyra wanting to kill Alicent's son. But hey, that's a next season problem. This season ended with them on the same side. Power of friendship, winner for season 2. How about the loser, Daniel? What did you have down for loser?
I have 2 down here, so I will maybe cheat and I guess say them both. But first one is got to be Aegon. Like starts as the king and now is just being overtaken by his brother Aemond and is fleeing King's Landing. Seems to be in a pretty bad spot from where he started. And I also just as a side put Otto, starting as Hand of the King and now being kidnapped by some people we're not 100% sure who they are yet. So those 2 are the minds I think have, pretty big losers this season.
You know, I think that's very fair. I would also throw out the citizens of Westeros are the real losers here, being sucked into warfare over really petty squabbles. But I think Otto Hightower is actually the big loser. I mean, we even saw at the end of the season he's been kidnapped by someone. He was disgraced by a petulant teenager. Essentially, I don't know how old Aegon is, but he was acting like a petulant teenager. So, I would say that's a pretty big loss, pretty big blow to the ego for what was for a long time the second most powerful man in Westeros. So got to go with Otto. And yeah, citizens of Westeros getting starved, getting sick, having rulers who don't seem to care about them that much. All right, Daniel. What do you think about this season's wild card?
I actually ended up saying Massaria for this one. I think I was not anticipating her being this impactful or influential when we started the season, but her ability to understand the small folk and use that understanding and provide that for Rhaenyra so that she can actually gain them onto her side and benefit in that way, I think was something that I was not anticipating or expecting. And even with all that, not exactly sure where that's going to take Rhaenyra in the future. So I think I've got to go with Massaria on that one.
I think Massaria is a good one. Basically the same thing I said. I used the same answer twice because I also said the small folk of Westeros. I think they're the biggest losers, but I think they're also the biggest wild card. Massaria definitely is sort of the stand-in for all of them. I think she's supposed to represent, or at least this season was supposed to represent the voice of the people, the citizens of Westeros. But I still think there's more to come there. I think I'm not sure how it's going to play out right now when Rhaenyra has favor, but I think the tides could turn pretty quickly. I mean, we've seen how fickle the people of Westeros are. So, let's see. Let's see what happens. But I think we are in for a couple more twists and turns in terms of the allegiance of the people who are giving them the royals their power. All right, Daniel. I've got a couple of special season 2 awards. I'll kick us off here. And the winner of the worst deployment of fan service award goes to, drumroll, Daenerys appearing in Daemon's visions because I guess people still like the Khaleesi. Remember, I thought she was Hitler, though. Do people still love her? Is that the thing?
I mean, yeah, I think obviously people still love Daenerys, but when the person who plays Daenerys is Emilia Clarke, right?
Yeah, Emilia Clarke. That's it.
Okay. Emilia. I mean, when you have Emilia Clarke, like who doesn't want more Emilia Clarke? So you can't really blame them on that.
I'm not blaming Emilia Clarke. And I don't even think they used her for the shot. I just think that was a weird. We had a disagreement last week about the way the visions were deployed. I actually thought the visions were cool, but yeah, that was the one I was like, okay, we don't really need to see Daenerys, her back, the hair. I don't know. So it was a choice. What about you, Daniel? What is one of your special awards for the season?
I have to do it, and it's going to sound harsh, but I say this in jest because, like I said, I gave it a B. I still really much enjoyed the season, but I've got to go with the anticlimactic award goes to season 2 of the House of the Dragon, just because we don't get to a climax, it feels like. And so very anticlimactic season.
You could also call it the worst sex of the year award, because there's no climaxing and it's all build up, no payoff, man. Come on.
I tried to be a little bit more I tried to be a little bit classier than that, Caleb.
This is Game of Thrones adjacent, Daniel.
Fair. Maybe I should have just gone for it.
Okay. I am tactless at this point. My next award is the I See Dead People Award, and this year's award goes to, drumroll, not the White Walker. No, not the White Walker. It is Viserys Targaryen's appearance in Daemon's visions. Love Paddy Considine. Love anytime he shows up. Viserys was probably my favorite character to watch last season, so getting him in very organic and thoughtful ways this season was pretty neat. Daniel, how about you? Any other special awards you want to hand out this year?
Yeah, I will hand out the I'm a Psychic award to Helena. She was predicting things all over the place, and it seems to be perhaps we're going to maybe get into that a little bit more, perhaps. So, yeah, we're going to go. I know we talked about last week, she's perhaps specifically I forgot the term, a green
grain seer.
a green seer, perhaps. And so, but I'll be with the more generic term of psychic. So yeah, I'm a psychic award.
You could also say she's the medium award of some sort. Yeah. Or maybe you could say the Alakazam award, like the Pokemon, like the Alakazam.
Oh, yeah.
Especially this year's Alakazam is Helena. Yes. Well, Daniel, is there anything else you'd like to add about House of the Dragon Season 2 before we wrap up the show?
Just that, I know these last couple episodes on the podcast, it probably sounds like I've been a little bit harsh on it, but I really did love the season. I think that there was a lot of great things, and I am really excited for the next season.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo that. I think, listen, we're only critical of something because we really like it and we want it to be better and we know it can be. We know the potential it's there. And I think the season was a very good season of TV. Just want to reiterate, good, capital G, very good. Not necessarily great. At least not great in the way that like HBO's best shows tend to be, like a Succession or a Game of Thrones. You name it. But it is very good. It is very enjoyable, and it has a lot to offer. So even though we've been harsh on it, just know that it's coming from a place of we love this thing. And we love to talk about this thing. I feel like we're mostly positive most of the time. Just the last couple episodes have been, a little harsh because we've been disappointed. But, here's the thing. If I'm going to blame anyone for this, it's really just going to be Dave Zaslav, who ruins everything he touches. That is the CEO of Warner Brothers Discovery. Man, what a bloodbath. I'm sure that cutting it from an order of 10 episodes down to 8 due to budgeting constraints was definitely his idea. And, I guess my question, and I should probably dig into this, is when did they find out they only had 8 episodes? Because it kind of feels like they thought they had 10 until all of a sudden they didn't. And I blame Dave Zaslav. I don't know if that's true. Maybe he's an easy target, but bad decisions like this, left and right. It reeks of Dave Zaslav decision. That said, hey, if you want to keep up with the Cast Beyond the Wall in the offseason, I just want to remind you can keep up with us on Twitter at cast_beyond_GOT, or on Facebook at facebook.com/cast beyond the wall. You can find me, of course, on all channels, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, what have you, at C Masters Talk. That's letter C Masters Talk. And, of course, doing all sorts of film review discussion things over at thesunmetropolis.com. Daniel Stull, where can people of the world engage with you in the off season when they want to reach out and they want the call for Kristen Cole?
You can always follow me on Instagram and Letterboxd at dstull91, and I am trying to do a little bit better of keeping that Letterboxd going, so that might be a good place to follow me.
Mm-hmm. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning into our final review of House of the Dragon Season 2. It's been a blast being back with you for another year. Stay tuned to our RSS feed and social media channels for more announcements in the future. Until next time, just remember, winter is coming.